The bourbon burned just right as I watched my wife Jenna arrange flowers with the precision of a surgeon. Every petal had to be perfect for tonight's special dinner, as she'd been calling it for the past week. "Cole will be here at 7, she said without looking up, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when discussing her college sweetheart. "I want everything to be absolutely perfect." "Very thoughtful," I replied, taking another sip. The amber liquid helped wash down the bitter taste that had been building in my mouth since she'd announced this brilliant idea. Cole Merrick. The golden boy himself was gracing our Boston high-rise with his presence. Hedge fund manager, flashy Audi driver, and the man who'd been texting my wife at increasingly inappropriate hours. I'm Reid Trenner, by the way, IT security consultant, bourbon enthusiast, and apparently the world's most oblivious husband until about 3 weeks ago. That's when I'd noticed the changes. Jenna working late more often, new lingerie appearing in her drawer, and those secretive phone calls that ended abruptly when I walked into the room. Being in cybersecurity has its advantages. I know how to piece together digital breadcrumbs better than most. "I'm running to the market," Jenna announced, grabbing her purse. "Don't touch anything in the kitchen." The moment her heels clicked out of earshot, I got to work. 20 years in IT security teaches you to be thorough, methodical, and most importantly, to always have a backup plan. While Jenna shopped for her romantic reunion dinner, I began implementing mine. First stop, the building management office. Carla, our drama-loving building manager, was more than happy to chat while I reviewed our lease agreement. Turns out, having your name as the primary tenant and paying all the bills for 5 years carries certain privileges. "Oh, Reid," Carla whispered conspiratorially, "I've been meaning to mention, there's been some unusual activity in your unit. Late-night visitors when you're traveling for work." "Really?" I kept my voice neutral while my fingers worked on the paperwork. "How unusual?" "Well, that handsome man with the expensive car has been here several times, always when you're away." She leaned closer. "And between you and me, Mrs. Trenner seems quite enthusiastic about his visits." I signed the lease modification with a steady hand. "Thanks for letting me know, Carla. I appreciate your discretion." Next, I visited our bank. Amazing how much easier financial transactions become when you're the primary account holder and have been managing the family finances for years. I'd discovered Jenna's little secret fund, money she'd been skimming from our joint account for months. Every penny went into a new account, properly documented and legally transferred. The locksmith arrived just as I finished boxing up Jenna's belongings. Professional movers would have been faster, but I needed the therapeutic value of handling each item myself. Her expensive perfumes, designer clothes, and that collection of romantic novels she thought I didn't know about, everything packed with care and labeled for pickup. By 6:30, I was showered, dressed, and waiting with a fresh bourbon when Jenna's key failed to work in the newly changed lock. The knocking started soft, then grew increasingly frantic. I let her knock for a full minute before opening the door. "What the hell, Reid?" She pushed past me, then stopped short at the sight of the neatly stacked boxes. "What is this?" "Your dinner menu changed," I said calmly, closing the door behind her. "I thought you might want to take your things with you when you leave." Her face cycled through confusion, anger, and something that might have been fear. "You can't just—" "Actually, I can." I handed her a folder. "Lease modification effective immediately. Bank statements showing the transfer of funds from your secret account back to our joint account, which is now solely in my name. And these—" I pulled out my phone and played a recording. Her voice, crystal clear, discussing her boring husband and how Cole made her feel alive again during one of her late-night calls with her best friend Tori. "You recorded me?" Her voice cracked. "I secured our network. You chose to use our home Wi-Fi for your intimate conversations." I shrugged. Occupational hazard of being married to someone in cybersecurity. The intercom buzzed. Cole's voice came through the speaker, smooth and confident. "Hey, I'm here for dinner." Jenna looked at me with something approaching panic. I smiled and pressed the button. "Come on up, Cole. Jenna's been waiting for you." She grabbed my arm. "Reid, please, we can talk about this." "We are talking about it." I gently removed her hand. "You're leaving, tonight, with your boxes and your boyfriend." The elevator dinged, and Cole's footsteps echoed in the hallway. Designer shoes on marble, you can always tell. "This isn't over," Jenna hissed. I opened the door just as Cole raised his hand to knock. He looked every bit the part, tailored suit, perfect hair, and that confident smile that had probably charmed its way through half of Boston's social scene. "Reid!" He extended his hand like we were old friends. "Thanks for having me over." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, shaking his hand with just enough pressure to make him wince. "Though I'm afraid there's been a change of plans." Cole looked between Jenna and the boxes, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding to something resembling panic. "Jenna's moving out tonight," I continued conversationally. "I thought you might want to help her with her things." "Now wait just a minute," Cole started. "No, you wait." My voice stayed level, but something in my tone made him take a step back. "You've been screwing my wife in my home, in my bed for months. The least you can do is help her move her stuff." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Jenna's phone was already in her hand, fingers flying over the screen. I could see Tori's name on the display. "Get everyone," she said into the phone, not caring that Cole and I could hear every word. "He'll regret this. We're going to destroy him." She hung up and looked at me with pure venom. "You have no idea what you've just started." I raised my bourbon in a mock toast, looking forward to finding out. Jenna's counterattack began before dawn. My phone buzzed with notifications, social media posts, text messages, and voicemails from mutual friends who'd received quite an earful about my alleged shortcomings as a husband. According to the gospel of Jenna, I was controlling, emotionally abusive, and had been secretly monitoring her every move. The narrative painted her as a victim, finally breaking free from a toxic marriage. Too bad for her, I'd spent the last 3 weeks preparing for exactly this scenario. Mason, my bartender friend at O'Malley's, called around 10 a.m. "Dude, you need to get down here. Jenna and her crew are holding court at the corner table, and they're not being subtle about trashing you." "Let them talk," I said, but I was already reaching for my jacket. Sometimes the best defense is letting your opponent overplay their hand. O'Malley's was packed for a Tuesday morning, mostly with the unemployed socialite crowd that Jenna ran with. I could see her table from the entrance, Jenna, Tori, and 3 other women I recognized from various dinner parties. They were animated, voices carrying across the room. I took a seat at the bar where Mason was polishing glasses with unnecessary vigor. "They've been here since 9, he murmured. "Jenna's been showing everyone text messages, claiming you've been stalking her." "Interesting." I sipped my coffee and opened my laptop. "Mind if I use your Wi-Fi? You know the password." What Jenna didn't know was that I'd been monitoring her digital footprint for weeks, not illegally. Everything I'd accessed was either public or information she'd shared on devices connected to our home network. The same network she was still using, thanks to her phone's automatic connection settings. Her current location, O'Malley's. Her recent activity, uploading photos to social media with captions about starting fresh and escaping toxic situations. But more interesting were the messages she'd been sending to Cole, messages that painted a very different picture than the victim narrative she was spinning for her friends. "Mason," I called softly, "could you do me a favor?" "Depends on the favor." I showed him my laptop screen. "See this? These are screenshots of text messages between my loving wife and her boyfriend, discussing how they're going to take me for everything I'm worth, and make me pay for being such a boring loser. Think your other customers might find them interesting? Mason's eyes widened as he read. Holy crap, Reid. She really wrote this stuff? Timestamps don't lie. I closed the laptop. I'm going to send these to the printer behind the bar. Maybe accidentally leave a few copies where people might see them. Within 20 minutes, Jenna's pity party had turned into a spectacle of whispered conversations and sideways glances. I watched from my bar stool as Tori picked up one of the accidentally dropped printouts and went pale. The confrontation was inevitable. "You bastard!" Jenna's voice cut through the bar's ambient noise as she stormed over. "How dare you spy on me?" "I didn't spy on anyone," I replied calmly, not turning around. "I simply shared some of your more colorful observations about our marriage. You know, the ones where you and Cole discuss my pathetic career and how easy it'll be to take half my assets." She grabbed my shoulder, trying to spin me around. "Those were private conversations." "Were they?" I finally turned to face her. "Because according to the timestamps, you sent most of these messages while connected to our home network, which makes them subject to our household's digital security protocols." "That's not legal." "Actually, it is. I'm the network administrator for our home system. You agreed to the terms of service when you connected your devices." I smiled. "You might want to read the fine print next time." Tori appeared at Jenna's shoulder, looking mortified. "Jen, maybe we should go." "No!" Jenna's voice was getting shrill. "I'm not letting him humiliate me like this." "You're doing a fine job of that yourself," I observed, gesturing around the bar where everyone was now openly staring. Cole chose that moment to make his entrance, probably summoned by one of Jenna's frantic texts. He surveyed the scene, Jenna red-faced and trembling, me sitting calmly at the bar, and a room full of people holding printouts of their private conversations. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded. "Your girlfriend is having a public meltdown," I said. "Care to join her?" He started toward me with what I assume he thought was an intimidating swagger. I didn't move from my bar stool, but Mason appeared between us with a baseball bat. "Gentlemen," Mason said pleasantly, "let's keep this civilized." Cole stopped short. "This is harassment." "No," I corrected. "This is consequences. You want to play games with other people's lives? Fine, but don't expect the other players to follow your rules." My phone buzzed with a text from Carla. "Your packages arrived. Building security helped me store them in the basement. Also, someone's been asking questions about getting access to your old unit." I showed the text to Jenna. "Looks like Cole's been trying to get back into the apartment. Trespassing charges might complicate his security clearance for that hedge fund job." Cole's face went white. "You can't prove anything." "I don't have to. Building security cameras and witness testimony from the management office should be sufficient." I stood up, leaving money on the bar. "Enjoy your drinks, folks. Next round's on the happy couple." As I walked toward the exit, I heard Jenna's voice behind me, no longer trying to maintain her victim facade. "This isn't over, Reid. You hear me? This isn't over." I paused at the door and looked back. "You're absolutely right, Jenna. It's not." The war had officially begun. Hayes Relin knocked on my door at exactly 6 p.m., looking like a man walking to his own execution. My neighbor had always been the jovial type, quick with a joke, slower with his rent payments, and apparently desperate enough to get involved in Jenna's schemes. "Come in, Hayes." I stepped aside to let him enter. "Thanks for accepting my dinner invitation." "Did I have a choice?" His voice was hollow. "Everyone has choices. Some just have better options than others." I gestured toward the dining room where I'd set the table for 6. "The others should be arriving soon." Hayes stared at the formal place settings, the good china, the candles. "What is this, Reid?" "A dinner party. The kind Jenna always wanted to host but never quite managed." I poured myself a bourbon. "Water? I know you're not drinking these days." He slumped into a chair. "How did you find out about the loan?" "Your creditor sold the note to a collection agency. The collection agency sold it to an investment firm. The investment firm sold it to me. I sat across from him. Perfectly legal, all documented, and now I own your debt. Funny how these things work out. The intercom buzzed. Carla's voice. Your guests are here. Send them up. Hayes looked toward the door with the expression of a condemned man hearing footsteps in the corridor. Jenna entered first, dressed to impress in a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than Hayes made in a month. Cole followed, trying to project confidence, but failing to hide the nervous energy that had been eating at him since our bar encounter. Reid. Jenna's voice was ice-cold professional. Thank you for agreeing to discuss this like adults. Wouldn't dream of handling it any other way. I stood as Carla and Mason entered behind them. You remember Carla from building management and Mason from O'Malley's. I thought we might need witnesses for our adult conversation. Cole's composure cracked slightly. Witnesses for what? Dinner conversation. Please, everyone sit. I'd spent considerable time planning the seating arrangement. Jenna at one end of the table, me at the other. Cole to her right, Hayes to her left. Carla and Mason flanking me like bookends. The meal itself was simple. Roasted chicken, vegetables, wine for those who wanted it. I played the gracious host, making small talk about the weather, the building's new security measures, and Hayes's financial difficulties. It's remarkable, I said, cutting into my chicken. How quickly circumstances can change. One day you're living comfortably, the next you're facing bankruptcy. Hayes pushed food around his plate without eating. Of course, I continued, sometimes people find themselves in difficult positions because of the choices they make. Poor judgment, questionable associations, that sort of thing. What's your point, Reid? Jenna's patience was wearing thin. My point is that Hayes here owes approximately $47,000 to various creditors. Credit cards, personal loans, back rent on that restaurant space he leased last year. I took a sip of wine. The kind of debt that can ruin a man's future. Cole shifted uncomfortably. What does this have to do with us? Well, Hayes thought he'd found a solution to his problems, a generous benefactor willing to help him out of his financial hole in exchange for a small favor. I looked directly at Hayes. Care to tell everyone about our conversation this afternoon? Hayes's hands were shaking. Reid, please! It's okay, Hayes. These are all friends here. My voice stayed conversational, but there was steel underneath. Tell them about Jenna's offer. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. Finally, Hayes spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. She offered to pay off my debts if I would help her get back into the apartment. Said she had things she needed to retrieve. Jenna's face flushed. That's not... She wanted me to distract the building security while Cole used his key card to access the service elevator. Hayes looked miserable. Said it would be simple, no one would get hurt. Except, I added helpfully, the key card she gave Cole was deactivated 3 days ago, and the things she wanted to retrieve were actually financial documents she'd hidden in a safety deposit box behind the bedroom mirror. Cole's fork clattered to his plate. How could you possibly know that? Because I found the box yesterday. Fascinating reading, really. Bank statements, loan applications, correspondence with investment brokers. I paused for effect. Tell me, Cole, does your current employer know about your gambling problem? The color drained from his face. I don't have a gambling problem. $50,000 losses over 6 months suggest otherwise, particularly when those losses were covered by unauthorized loans against client accounts. Mason whistled low. That's embezzlement, isn't it? Technically, it's securities fraud, I corrected. Much more serious. Federal charges, mandatory minimums, that sort of thing. Jenna was staring at Cole with dawning horror. You stole money? I borrowed it, Cole said desperately. I was going to pay it back. With what? Your hedge fund salary? I laughed. The salary you're about to lose when your employers receive copies of these documents tomorrow morning? Cole lunged across the table at me, but Mason was faster, catching his wrist and twisting just enough to make him gasp. "Easy there, sport," Mason said. "Let's keep this civilized." "You're destroying people's lives," Cole shouted. "I'm revealing the truth about people's choices." I remained seated, calm. "There's a difference." Carla had been quietly filming with her phone. "This is better than cable," she murmured. Jenna finally found her voice. "What do you want, Reid?" "I want you to understand something, Jenna. You thought you could manipulate everyone around you. Hayes with his debts, Cole with his ego, me with my supposed ignorance. But manipulation only works when the other person doesn't know they're being manipulated." I stood and walked to the window overlooking the city. "I've known about your affair for months. I've known about Cole's financial problems, Hayes' desperation, and your little conspiracy to take half my assets in a divorce settlement." "That's not—" "It is, actually." I turned back to face them. "The prenup you signed 5 years ago is ironclad. In case of adultery, you get nothing. But you thought you could claim emotional abuse, paint me as a controlling husband, and convince a judge to void the agreement." Tori's voice came from the hallway. "Jenna, are you in there?" I smiled. Right on schedule. I invited her too. Tori entered with 2 other women from Jenna's social circle, all dressed for what they clearly expected to be a different kind of evening. "Ladies," I said pleasantly, "perfect timing. We were just discussing Jenna and Cole's business partnership." "What business partnership?" Tori asked. I handed each of them a folder. "The one where Jenna was laundering Cole's embezzled funds through fake consulting contracts. Quite clever, really. Too bad it's also quite illegal." The room erupted in chaos. Jenna screaming denials, Cole trying to explain, Hayes begging for mercy, and Jenna's friends reading the documents with growing shock. Through it all, I remained calm, sipping my wine and watching my carefully constructed plan unfold. "The beauty of the truth," I said to no one in particular, "is that it doesn't need defending." The next morning brought consequences with the efficiency of a Swiss timepiece. Cole's hedge fund terminated his employment before the markets opened. Jenna's temporary rental, a overpriced studio she'd secured with her secret fund money, was suddenly unavailable due to irregularities in the application process. I learned this from Mason, who'd heard it from Tori, who'd apparently spent the night fielding frantic calls from Jenna as her support network crumbled in real time. "She's staying at the Marriott downtown," Mason reported over coffee at O'Malley's. "Tori says she's been making calls all morning, trying to find a lawyer." "Good luck with that," I replied. "Hard to retain counsel when your assets are frozen pending investigation." "You froze her assets?" "I reported suspicious financial activity to the appropriate authorities. They froze the assets." I shrugged. Due process. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at the parking garage, level B3. Come alone." I showed the message to Mason. "Guess who found a new phone? You're not seriously going, are you?" "Wouldn't miss it, but maybe call the building security in about 20 minutes, just to be safe." The parking garage was dimly lit and mostly empty at 10 a.m. on a Wednesday. I found Cole pacing near the elevator bank, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled. "Reid!" He spun around as my footsteps echoed off the concrete. "Thank God you came." "You look terrible, Cole. Rough night?" "You have to stop this, please." He stepped closer and I could smell the desperation on him. "I'll do anything you want. Just call off the investigation." "What investigation?" I kept my voice innocent. "Don't play games with me." His composure finally shattered. "You know exactly what you've done. The SEC, the FBI, my employers, they're all asking questions I can't answer. Then maybe you should have asked those questions before you started stealing client money." He grabbed my jacket lapels, pressing me against a concrete pillar. "I never stole anything. Those were legitimate loans. Loans that your clients didn't authorize. Loans you used to cover gambling debts and impress my wife." I didn't struggle against his grip. How is that legitimate? I was going to pay it back. With what money? Your salary? The salary you just lost? I smiled. Or were you planning to steal more? He shoved me harder against the pillar. You destroyed my life. I revealed your choices. There's a difference. A car alarm started blaring somewhere in the garage, then another, then a cascade of them as the sound triggered proximity sensors throughout the level. Cole spun around, confused by the chaos of noise and flashing lights. I'd triggered the system from my phone, a little perk of being friendly with building security. The cacophony was deafening, but it served its purpose. Every security camera in the garage was now recording, and building security would be here within minutes. What the hell? Cole started to say, but I was already walking toward the elevator. Enjoy explaining this to security, I called over the alarms. I'm sure they'll be very interested in why you're harassing residents in the parking garage. The elevator doors closed just as I heard security guards shouting for Cole to put his hands where they could see them. By the time I reached my apartment, Carla was waiting with updates. Your friend Cole is having a very interesting conversation with building security, she reported gleefully. Something about trespassing and harassment. They're reviewing the camera footage now. Unfortunate, I said. I hope he gets the help he needs. Oh, and Mrs. Trenner called. She wants to schedule a time to collect her remaining belongings. What remaining belongings? That's what I told her. Carla grinned. She didn't take it well. That afternoon, Jenna appeared at my door with a police officer in tow. Officer Martinez looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Mr. Trenner, he said wearily, your wife claims you're withholding her personal property. Ex-wife, I corrected, and I'm not withholding anything. Everything she owned was packed and made available for pickup. She chose not to collect it. Where are her things now? Martinez asked. Storage unit downtown. I have the receipts. I handed him a folder. 3 days' notice, as required by law. When she failed to collect her belongings, I moved them to storage to avoid further conflict. Jenna's face was red with fury. Those are my things. You can't just… Actually, ma'am, he can, Martinez interrupted, reading the documents. Legal separation, proper notice, documented storage, everything appears to be in order. But I need my clothes, my jewelry. Then you should have collected them when you had the opportunity. I kept my voice reasonable. The storage unit is paid through the end of the month. After that, it's your responsibility. Martinez handed back the folder. Ma'am, this is a civil matter. You'll need to work it out between yourselves or through your attorneys. After they left, I poured myself a bourbon and settled in to watch the evening news. The lead story was about a local hedge fund under federal investigation for securities fraud. They didn't mention Cole by name, but the footage of FBI agents carrying boxes out of his office building was quite dramatic. My phone rang. Jenna's voice was barely controlled. You're enjoying this, aren't you? I'm enjoying the peace and quiet, I admitted. It's been a stressful few days. This isn't over, Reid. I'll find a way to make you pay for what you've done. Jenna, I said gently, I haven't done anything to you. I've simply stopped enabling your behavior. There's a difference. You've destroyed everything. I've revealed the truth. If that destroyed everything, maybe everything wasn't worth preserving. The line went quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, colder, more calculating. You think you're so smart. You think you've won. But you don't know everything, Reid. You don't know about the insurance policy. What insurance policy? But she'd already hung up. The insurance policy turned out to be Hayes Rellin's restaurant space, the one he'd been unable to afford, the one that had driven him into debt, and the one that Jenna had secretly been financing through a shell company. I discovered this 3 days later when Hayes appeared at my door at midnight, drunk and desperate. She's calling in the loan, he slurred, swaying in my doorway. Says I have 48 hours to pay or she takes the restaurant. I thought you couldn't afford the restaurant. I couldn't. She offered to back me, said it was an investment opportunity. He laughed bitterly. Turns out it was a trap. I let him in and made coffee while he explained. Jenna had been planning this for months, creating a web of financial obligations that would give her leverage over everyone in our social circle. Hayes was just the first victim. She has dirt on everyone, he continued. Tori's husband's tax problems, Mason's immigration status, even Carla's son's juvenile record. She's been collecting information like some kind of social media stalker. And now she's using it. She wants me to testify that you threatened me, that you forced me to lie about her and Cole. Hayes looked up with red eyes. Says if I don't cooperate, she'll ruin me completely. I sipped my coffee and considered the situation. Jenna was escalating, trying to create a narrative where I was the villain and she was the victim fighting back. It was actually quite clever. Hayes, I said finally, what if I told you there was another option? What kind of option? The kind where you don't lose your restaurant, don't go bankrupt, and don't have to lie for Jenna. Hope flickered in his eyes. I'm listening. The plan I outlined was simple, but required precise timing. In 3 days, our mutual friend David was hosting his annual rooftop party, a who's who of Boston's social scene. Jenna would be there, along with most of the people she was trying to manipulate. She's planning to make a scene, I explained. Public accusations, crocodile tears, the full performance. She wants to turn everyone against me before the federal investigation gets too far along. So what do? We let her perform, but we make sure the audience knows they're watching a show. The next 2 days were spent in careful preparation. I reached out to everyone in our social circle, not to defend myself or attack Jenna, but simply to suggest they might want to hear all sides of the story before making judgments. Mason helped by casually mentioning to anyone who would listen that he'd witnessed some interesting conversations at O'Malley's. Carla did her part by sharing building security footage with residents who asked about the disturbances in our hallway. But the real masterstroke came from an unexpected source, Cole himself. He called me Friday afternoon, his voice hollow with defeat. The FBI wants me to cooperate, he said. They're offering a plea deal if I provide information about other people involved in the scheme. What scheme would that be? Don't pretend you don't know. Jenna's money laundering operation, the fake consulting contracts, the shell companies, the restaurant financing. He paused. They know about all of it, Reid. Someone gave them everything. I'm sure they're very thorough. Was it you? Did you turn me in? Cole, I said patiently, I didn't have to turn you in. You turned yourself in the moment you decided to steal client money to impress another man's wife. She's going to blame me for everything. You know that, right? She'll claim she didn't know where the money came from. Will she? I have recordings, he said suddenly. Conversations where she talks about the scheme, about using Hayes' restaurant to clean the money. I recorded everything on my phone. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm not going down alone. If she wants to throw me under the bus, fine. But I'm taking her with me. David's rooftop party was in full swing when I arrived Saturday evening. The weather was perfect. Clear skies, gentle breeze, and a spectacular view of the Boston skyline. The guest list read like a social register. Lawyers, doctors, business owners, and the kind of people who considered themselves the city's cultural elite. Jenna made her entrance fashionably late, dressed in white like some kind of martyred saint. She worked the crowd with practiced skill, accepting condolences for her difficult situation and sharing carefully edited versions of recent events. I watched from the bar, nursing a bourbon and waiting for the right moment. She's really laying it on thick, Mason observed, joining me with a beer. Half the party thinks you're some kind of monster. Give it time. The confrontation began around 10 p.m. Jenna had gathered a substantial audience near the railing overlooking the city. Her voice carried across the rooftop as she described her escape from an abusive marriage. I know it's hard to believe, she was saying. But Reid has been controlling every aspect of my life for years, monitoring my phone calls, tracking my movements, isolating me from friends. Murmurs of sympathy rippled through the crowd. Several people glanced in my direction with disapproving looks. The worst part, Jenna continued, is how he's turned everyone against me, spreading lies, manipulating evidence, even bribing people to support his version of events. That was my cue. I walked slowly through the crowd, which parted to let me pass. Conversations died as people sensed the drama about to unfold. "Jenna," I said pleasantly, "what an interesting story. Very creative." She turned to face me with practiced vulnerability. "Reid, please don't make a scene. These people don't need to hear." "Actually, I think they do." I pulled out my phone, especially since you've been sharing your version of events so generously. I connected to the party's sound system. David always used the same wireless setup, and I'd helped him configure it years ago. The speakers crackled to life. "What are you doing?" Jenna's composure started to crack. "Sharing some additional context." I pressed play. Jenna's voice filled the rooftop, crystal clear through the high-end speakers. "Reid is such an idiot. He has no idea what's really going on. By the time I'm finished with him, he'll be lucky to keep his job, let alone half his assets." The crowd fell silent. Jenna's face went pale. But I wasn't finished. The recording continued with Cole's voice joining the conversation. "The restaurant laundering is working perfectly. Hayes has no idea he's cleaning embezzled funds. Even if someone investigates, the paper trail leads back to him, not us." "Stop it," Jenna whispered. "And here's my personal favorite," I said, advancing to the next recording. This one was Jenna talking to Tori. "I've been documenting everything I can use against Reid in court. Fake diary entries about emotional abuse, staged photos of evidence, even coached Hayes on what to say if anyone asks questions." The crowd was staring at Jenna with a mixture of shock and disgust. Someone near the back called out, "Is that really you?" "Those recordings are illegal," Jenna shouted. "He can't use them." "Actually," said a familiar voice from the crowd, "they're perfectly legal." Cole stepped forward, looking haggard but determined. "I made those recordings myself, with my own phone, and I've already turned copies over to federal investigators." The rooftop erupted in chaos. Jenna screamed accusations at Cole, who responded with his own revelations about her money laundering scheme. Hayes appeared from somewhere in the crowd to add his own testimony about being manipulated and threatened. Through it all, I stood calmly at the center of the storm, watching 5 years of marriage and a lifetime of social connections dissolve in the space of 20 minutes. "You did this!" Jenna finally turned on me, her mask of victimhood completely abandoned. "You orchestrated all of this." "I documented the truth," I replied. "Everything else was your choice." She lunged at me then, fingernails aimed at my face, but several partygoers caught her arms before she could make contact. "Get her out of here," David said quietly. "Security will escort her to the street." As they led her away, Jenna's voice carried across the rooftop one last time. "This isn't over, Reid. You hear me? This isn't over." I raised my bourbon in a final toast. "Yes, it is." The storm hit Boston with the fury of nature unleashed, turning the city streets into rivers and the night into chaos. I was walking home from David's party, savoring the cool rain and the satisfaction of a plan perfectly executed, when I heard the shouting. "Reid! Reid!" Jenna's voice cut through the thunder, raw with desperation and rage. I turned to see her stumbling down the sidewalk, soaked to the skin, her white dress now transparent and clinging. Cole was behind her, equally drenched, trying to catch up. "We need to talk," she screamed over the storm. I stopped under a streetlight, rain streaming from my hair. "I thought we covered everything at the party." She reached me and grabbed my jacket with both hands, her face twisted with fury. "You destroyed everything. My reputation, my friends, my future, everything. You did that yourself, Jenna. I just provided the documentation. Cole arrived, breathing hard. Reid, listen to me. The federal investigation, they're going to charge both of us. Conspiracy, fraud, money laundering. We're looking at serious prison time. That's unfortunate. Unfortunate? Jenna's voice cracked. That's all you have to say? Unfortunate? Lightning illuminated the empty street as thunder rolled overhead. We were alone except for the occasional car splashing through puddles, their headlights briefly illuminating our confrontation before disappearing into the night. You want to know what's unfortunate? I stepped closer, my voice carrying despite the storm. What's unfortunate is that you had everything. A good marriage, financial security, a comfortable life, and you threw it all away for what? Excitement? Validation? The thrill of betraying someone who trusted you? I never loved you. The words came out like a confession torn from her throat. I married you for security, for stability, but I never loved you. I know. The admission didn't hurt as much as I'd expected. I've known for years. The question is, what did you think that entitled you to? Cole stepped between us, water streaming from his expensive suit. This is insane. We're standing in a thunderstorm arguing about ancient history while federal agents are preparing indictments. Ancient history? I laughed, the sound harsh against the rain. Cole, you embezzled money from your clients 3 weeks ago. You used that money to finance a money laundering operation through Hayes' restaurant. That's not ancient history, that's active federal crimes. We can fix this, Jenna said desperately. We can make a deal. I'll testify that you forced us into it, that you threatened us. With what? My devastating wit? My crushing knowledge of network security? I shook my head. Jenna, you're not thinking clearly. What could I possibly threaten you with that would force you to commit federal crimes? You're controlling. You manipulated us. I exposed you. There's a difference. A police car turned the corner, its headlights sweeping across us. For a moment, we were frozen in the glare like actors on a stage. Then the car passed, leaving us in the relative darkness of the storm. This is your last chance, Cole said, his voice taking on a threatening edge. Call off the investigation or we'll make you regret it. How? The simple question seemed to deflate him. He looked around as if expecting inspiration to strike with the lightning. We'll tell everyone you're lying, that you fabricated the evidence. What evidence did I fabricate? The recordings. You made the recordings, Cole. You just admitted it in front of 50 witnesses. Jenna pulled out her phone, water streaming across the screen. I'm calling the police. I'm telling them you're threatening us. Go ahead. I didn't move. Tell them I'm standing on a public sidewalk having a conversation. I'm sure they'll be fascinated. She dialed anyway, her fingers shaking with cold and rage. Police? I need help. My ex-husband is threatening me. What? No, he hasn't actually threatened. Well, he's standing here. No, I can't prove. What do you mean unless he's actually committed a crime? She hung up in frustration. Turns out, I observed, that having a conversation on a public street isn't actually illegal. Who knew? Cole grabbed my shirt, pulling me close enough that I could see the desperation in his eyes. You smug bastard. You think you're so clever, don't you? I think I'm adequately prepared. Prepared for what? I smiled. For this. My phone buzzed with a text message. I showed them the screen. Federal agents have arrested Hayes Relin on charges of conspiracy to commit money laundering. He's cooperating fully with the investigation. Jenna went white. Hayes is facing 20 years in federal prison. You really think he's going to protect the people who manipulated him into committing crimes? Another text arrived. Cole Merrick has been indicted on 14 counts of securities fraud and money laundering. Warrant issued for his arrest. Cole stared at the phone in horror. That's impossible. How could you know? Because I've been in contact with the federal task force since the beginning. I provided them with evidence, testimony, and full cooperation. I put the phone away. They've been building their case for weeks. You're working with the FBI? Jenna's voice was barely audible over the rain. I'm a cybersecurity consultant who discovered evidence of federal crimes. Of course I reported it to the appropriate authorities. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Cole looked around frantically as if considering running. Don't, I advised. It'll just make things worse. Worse? He laughed hysterically. How could things possibly be worse? You could resist arrest. Add a few more charges to your collection. The police cars rounded the corner with lights flashing, turning the rainy street into a chaos of red and blue illumination. Officers emerged with weapons drawn, shouting commands. Cole Merrick, you're under arrest. Cole raised his hands, water streaming from his fingers. This is all a mistake. As they cuffed him, he looked back at me with pure hatred. This isn't over, Reid. Yes, I said calmly. It is. They led Cole to the patrol car while reading him his rights. The charges were extensive: securities fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, wire fraud. Enough to put him away for decades. Jenna stood frozen, watching her co-conspirator disappear into the back of the police car. They're coming for you next, I told her gently. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't know the money was stolen. The recordings suggest otherwise. Those recordings are out of context. I was just playing along. I didn't really understand. Jenna. I stepped closer, rain dripping from my hair. Stop. Just stop. She looked up at me with something that might have been hope. Reid, please. We were married for 5 years. That has to count for something. It does count for something. It counts for the reason I gave you so many chances to come clean, to end the affair, to stop the criminal activity. I paused as thunder rolled overhead. You chose not to take those chances. I'll make it right. I'll testify against Cole. I'll cooperate with the investigation. You'll do whatever your lawyer advises you to do, but it won't change what you've already done. More sirens approached. The federal task force arriving to collect their second suspect. Mrs. Jennifer Trenner? The lead agent stepped forward with handcuffs ready. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit money laundering and wire fraud. As they read her rights, Jenna looked at me one last time. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far, and now you have to live with the consequences. They led her away in the rain, her white dress clinging to her frame like a shroud. I watched until the patrol cars disappeared into the storm, their lights fading into the distance. Then I walked home through the rain, past the building where Carla was probably watching from her window, past the bar where Mason would be closing up for the night, past the restaurant where Hayes had dreamed of success before greed destroyed him. At my apartment, I poured one final bourbon and stood at the window overlooking the city. The storm was beginning to pass, leaving the streets washed clean and gleaming under the streetlights. My phone buzzed with a text from the federal task force leader. Excellent work, Mr. Trenner. Your cooperation was invaluable. Both suspects are in custody and the investigation is complete. I deleted the message and finished my drink. Outside, Boston slept peacefully, unaware that justice had been served with the precision of a well-planned dinner party. The guest list was complete, the meal was finished, and everyone had gotten exactly what they deserved. The rain stopped, leaving only the sound of water dripping from the fire escape and the distant hum of traffic. I turned off the lights and went to bed, sleeping better than I had in months. It was over.